At my sister's engagement, she raised her glass and said, "Let's thank the person who taught me exactly what not to be," while smirking right at me. Everyone laughed. Even my parents stayed silent. I didn't say a word. I just left early, canceled the $12,000 venue deposit that was in my name, and soon the panic started. I, 31M, never thought my sister's engagement party would become the moment everything fell apart. But here we are. The venue looked perfect that evening. White lights draped across the garden, tables arranged just right, and the catering staff bustling around with final preparations. I had spent months coordinating every detail, putting down deposits, calling vendors, handling logistics that my parents couldn't manage on their own. The $12,000 venue deposit alone had maxed out my savings. But family comes first, right? My sister looked radiant in her emerald dress, accepting congratulations from relatives and friends. Her fiancé seemed genuinely happy, which gave me some comfort. Despite our complicated relationship, I wanted this night to be special for her. I had arrived early to oversee the final setup, making sure the flowers were positioned correctly and the sound system worked properly. The first few hours went smoothly. Guests mingled, the photographer captured candid moments, and the appetizers received compliments. My parents worked the room, introducing people and sharing stories about my sister's childhood. I stayed mostly in the background, ensuring everything ran on schedule and handling minor issues as they arose. Then came the toasts. My father spoke first, sharing heartfelt words about watching his daughter grow up and welcoming her fiancé into the family. Several friends followed with amusing anecdotes and well wishes. The atmosphere felt warm and celebratory, exactly what I had hoped to create when I started planning this event months ago. My sister stood up last, champagne glass raised high, her smile broad and confident. She thanked everyone for coming, expressed her excitement about the upcoming wedding, and talked about how grateful she felt for all the love surrounding her. The guests listened attentively, clearly moved by her words. But then her tone shifted slightly. She mentioned how important it was to learn from the people around you, both positive and negative examples. She talked about discovering who you really are by observing what you definitely don't want to become. Her eyes scanned the room deliberately, and I felt an uncomfortable knot forming in my stomach. She raised her glass higher and delivered the line that would replay in my head for weeks afterward. She wanted everyone to thank the person who taught her exactly what not to be. Her gaze landed directly on me as she said it, accompanied by a smirk that made her intentions crystal clear. The room erupted in laughter. Guests chuckled and applauded, assuming it was some kind of inside joke they weren't privy to. Cousins nudged each other and grinned. Family friends raised their glasses in response. Even the catering staff smiled from their positions around the room. I looked toward my parents, expecting them to intervene or at least show some discomfort with the situation. My mother avoided eye contact, suddenly fascinated by her napkin. My father stared into his drink, his jaw tight, but his mouth firmly closed. Neither of them said a word in my defense. The silence from the two people who should have supported me hurt more than my sister's public humiliation. I sat there for another few minutes, processing what had just happened. The conversations resumed around me, but everything felt distant and muffled. My sister continued accepting congratulations. Her fiancé looked confused but played along, and the party carried on as if nothing significant had occurred. But something significant had occurred, at least for me. I excused myself quietly, telling the nearest relative that I wasn't feeling well and needed to head home early. Nobody seemed particularly concerned or tried to convince me to stay. I collected my jacket from the coat check and walked to my car, my hands shaking slightly as I fumbled with the keys. The drive home gave me time to think clearly for the first time all evening. This wasn't the first incident between my sister and me, but it was definitely the most public and cruel. Growing up, she had always been the golden child while I was the responsible one who handled practical matters. I had covered for her mistakes, helped with her college expenses, and supported her through various relationship dramas over the years. And this was how she chose to repay that loyalty. By the time I reached my apartment, my hurt had transformed into something much colder and more focused. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the venue coordinator's number. It was late, but these situations required immediate action. The venue coordinator answered on the third ring, sounding tired but professional. I explained that there had been a family emergency and we needed to cancel the wedding reception that was scheduled for next month. She expressed sympathy and asked about rescheduling options. I told her we wouldn't be rescheduling. The cancellation policy was clearly outlined in our contract. Since we were canceling more than 30 days in advance, we would forfeit the entire deposit but wouldn't be liable for additional fees. I confirmed that I understood the financial implications and wanted to proceed immediately. She processed the cancellation while we were on the phone. Next, I called the catering company. Same conversation, same result. The $8,000 deposit was gone, but the wedding reception was officially canceled. The florist was next, followed by the photographer, the band, and the transportation service. By midnight, I had systematically dismantled the entire wedding reception that my sister had been planning for over a year. The deposits totaled nearly $30,000, all of which had been paid from my accounts because my sister claimed she was saving for the honeymoon and my parents were handling other wedding expenses. Every vendor had my name on the contracts, my credit card information on file, and my signature on the agreements, which meant I had the legal authority to cancel everything. I didn't sleep much that night, but I felt calmer than I had in hours. My phone remained silent, which suggested that my sister hadn't yet discovered what had happened. The vendors wouldn't contact her directly since I was listed as the primary contact for all reception-related services. The next morning brought the phone calls I had been expecting. My sister called first, her voice frantic and confused. She had received a confirmation email from her dress boutique asking if she still needed the reception dress since the venue had notified them about the cancellation. She wanted to know if there had been some kind of mistake or billing error. I told her there was no mistake. She demanded an explanation, her voice rising with each question. I calmly explained that after her toast the previous evening, I had decided to withdraw my financial support for her wedding reception. Since all the vendors had been paid through my accounts, and since the contracts were in my name, I had the right to cancel the services. The silence on the other end of the line stretched for nearly a minute. When she finally spoke again, her tone had shifted from confusion to anger. She accused me of being petty and vindictive, of ruining her special day over a harmless joke that everyone understood wasn't serious. She couldn't believe I would be so cruel and selfish over something so trivial. I asked her if she would have found it equally harmless if I had stood up at her engagement party and publicly mocked her in front of all our relatives and family friends. She insisted it wasn't the same thing. I disagreed and ended the call. My mother called 20 minutes later, her voice strained and diplomatic. She had spoken with my sister and understood that there had been some kind of misunderstanding the previous evening. She wanted to discuss the situation calmly and find a solution that would work for everyone involved. I told her that the only misunderstanding was my belief that my family actually respected me. She tried to explain that my sister had been nervous about giving a speech and probably just chose her words poorly. Young people sometimes say things they don't mean when they're under pressure, and it wasn't fair to punish her for what was essentially a social mistake. I reminded my mother that she had sat there silently while her daughter publicly humiliated her son, and that her current attempt at damage control was several hours too late to be meaningful. She asked what it would take to fix the situation. I told her that some things couldn't be fixed, only learned from. My father's call came that afternoon. He was less diplomatic than my mother and more direct about his frustration. He explained that I was acting like a child, that family members need to forgive each other's mistakes, and that my sister's wedding was bigger than whatever personal grievances I was nursing. I pointed out that the wedding ceremony would proceed exactly as planned, since the church and reception hall deposits had been paid by other family members. The only thing I had canceled was the reception, which I had been personally funding. He argued that I was being deliberately destructive and that my actions would affect dozens of guests who had made travel arrangements and hotel reservations. He wanted to know how I could be so selfish as to impact so many innocent people over something so minor. I suggested that he and my mother could cover the costs of rebooking everything if they felt so strongly about it. The phone call ended abruptly. Update 1. The next few days were surprisingly quiet. I had expected more phone calls, angry voicemails, or even surprise visits from family members trying to convince me to reverse my decision. Instead, my phone remained mostly silent except for a few text messages from cousins asking if I was feeling better after leaving the engagement party early. I went to work, maintained my normal routine, and tried not to think about the chaos that was probably unfolding in my sister's wedding planning. The deposits were gone, the vendors had been notified, and there was no undoing what I had set in motion. On Thursday, my sister showed up at my office. She looked exhausted and desperate, her usual confidence replaced by something that resembled panic. She asked my assistant if she could speak with me privately, and despite my better judgment, I agreed to see her. She sat across from my desk and immediately started crying. The tears seemed genuine, but I had learned not to trust my sister's emotional displays over the years. She had always been skilled at manipulating situations through carefully timed breakdowns and strategic vulnerability. She told me that she had spent the last 3 days trying to salvage her wedding reception. Most of the vendors I had canceled were already booked for her wedding date, since it was during peak season. The few venues that had availability were either completely wrong for what she had envisioned or priced far beyond what she could afford. Her fiancé's family was asking questions about why everything had been canceled so suddenly. Her friends were confused about whether they should still plan to attend a reception. The stress was affecting her sleep, her appetite, and her relationship with her future husband. She apologized for her speech at the engagement party. She claimed that she had been trying to make a joke about sibling rivalry and how brothers and sisters learn from each other's differences. She never intended to hurt my feelings or embarrass me in front of the family. She had been nervous about speaking publicly and hadn't realized how her words would sound to others. I listened without interrupting, letting her finish her explanation. When she was done, I asked her why she had looked directly at me while delivering the line about learning what not to be. If it had been a general comment about sibling relationships, why had she made eye contact with me specifically while smirking? She claimed that she had been looking around the room at various family members and hadn't focused on me intentionally. The smirk had been nervousness, not malice. She insisted that I had misinterpreted her body language and tone. I asked her why our parents had remained silent if her comments had been harmless sibling teasing. She didn't have an answer for that question. She begged me to reconsider my decision about the vendors. She offered to pay me back for all the deposits over time, even though we both knew she didn't have that kind of money. She promised to make a public apology to the family if that's what I wanted. She suggested we could go to counseling together to work through our relationship issues. I told her that I appreciated her apology, but that actions have consequences. She asked what she could do to fix the situation. I explained that there was nothing she could do. The deposits were gone, the vendors were booked elsewhere, and her wedding reception would need to be planned from scratch with whoever was willing to work with her timeline and budget. She started crying harder and asked how I could be so cruel to my own sister. I reminded her that she was the one who had chosen to publicly humiliate her own brother at what was supposed to be a family celebration. She left my office without saying goodbye. Update 2. 2 weeks later, I heard through family channels that my sister had managed to book a much smaller venue for her wedding reception. Instead of the elegant garden party we had originally planned, she would be having dinner at a local restaurant that could accommodate about 40 people instead of the original 120. Her guest list had been drastically reduced, which meant that many extended family members and family friends would no longer be invited to the reception. The photography package had been downgraded, the catering menu simplified, and the flowers limited to basic centerpieces. My mother called to inform me about these developments, clearly hoping I would feel guilty enough to offer financial assistance. I expressed sympathy for my sister's situation, but maintained that she had created her own problems. My mother then revealed something interesting. She had spoken with several relatives who attended the engagement party, and their recollections of my sister's speech were remarkably consistent with mine. Multiple people had noticed the pointed look in my direction and the deliberate timing of her comments. My mother admitted that my sister's behavior had been inappropriate and hurtful. However, she still felt that my response had been disproportionate to the offense. She believed that family members should be able to forgive each other's mistakes and move forward together, especially during important life events like weddings. I asked her why forgiveness only seemed to flow in one direction in our family. She didn't answer that question either. My father took a different approach when he called later that week. Instead of lecturing me about family loyalty, he tried to appeal to my practical nature. He explained that my sister had learned her lesson and would be more careful about her words in the future. He suggested that helping her now would demonstrate maturity and strength of character. He offered to personally guarantee that my sister would repay any financial assistance I provided for the wedding reception. I declined his offer. He asked if I intended to attend the wedding ceremony, given everything that had happened. I told him I was still deciding. The truth was that I had already made up my mind, but I wasn't ready to share that decision with my family yet. The wedding was still 6 weeks away, which gave me time to observe how the situation continued to develop. My sister made one more attempt to reach out, this time through a handwritten letter that arrived at my apartment. The letter was 3 pages long and covered familiar territory about misunderstandings, family bonds, and the importance of forgiveness. But buried in the middle of the letter was something that caught my attention. She wrote that she had always felt overshadowed by my academic achievements and professional success, and that sometimes her resentment about those feelings influenced her behavior toward me. She acknowledged that this wasn't fair or healthy, but she wanted me to understand the context behind some of our conflicts over the years. This was the closest thing to genuine insight I had ever received from my sister. She went on to explain that her comment at the engagement party had been motivated by frustration about always being compared to me by relatives and family friends. She felt like people constantly pointed to me as the example of responsibility and success, which made her feel inadequate and defensive. Again, this felt more honest than anything she had said during our previous conversations. The letter concluded with another apology and a request for reconciliation, but the middle section had given me something to think about. For the first time, I was hearing about her perspective on our sibling dynamic and the pressures she felt within our family structure. I didn't respond to the letter immediately, but I kept it on my kitchen counter and reread it several times over the following days. Update 3. The wedding day arrived on a beautiful Saturday in September. I had ultimately decided to attend the ceremony but skipped the reception, which seemed like a reasonable compromise that would satisfy my parents while maintaining my boundaries with my sister. The church was packed with family and friends, and my sister looked genuinely beautiful in her wedding dress. Her fiancé seemed nervous but happy, and the ceremony proceeded smoothly without any dramatic moments or uncomfortable speeches. During the service, I found myself thinking about the letter she had sent and the insights she had shared about feeling overshadowed and compared to me throughout our lives. I wondered if I had been oblivious to these dynamics while we were growing up, or if I had simply chosen to ignore them. After the ceremony, during the receiving line, my sister hugged me tightly and whispered that she was glad I had come. She didn't mention the reception or ask if I was planning to attend the dinner, which I appreciated. Her new husband shook my hand and thanked me for being there, which suggested that my sister had probably explained at least some of our recent conflicts to him. My parents seemed relieved that I had shown up and participated in the family photos without creating any scenes or tension. I left the church feeling surprisingly at peace with my decision to attend the ceremony while maintaining my boundary about the reception. Over the following weeks, I heard occasional updates about how my sister was adjusting to married life and settling into her new apartment with her husband. The reports were generally positive, and it sounded like the smaller reception had actually been more intimate and meaningful than the large party we had originally planned. 3 months after the wedding, my sister called me unexpectedly. She wanted to let me know that she and her husband had discussed our family situation extensively, and that he had helped her understand some things about sibling relationships and family dynamics that she hadn't recognized before. She had also started seeing a therapist to work through some of her feelings about competition, comparison, and resentment within our family. She asked if I would be willing to meet for coffee sometime to talk about our relationship and see if we could find a healthier way to interact going forward. I agreed to meet with her. The coffee meeting was awkward at first, but my sister seemed genuinely committed to having an honest conversation about our history and her behavior patterns. She took responsibility for the engagement party incident without making excuses or shifting blame to other people. She also shared some insights from her therapy sessions about how birth order, family expectations, and personality differences had created a dynamic where she felt constantly measured against my achievements and found wanting. This didn't excuse her behavior, but it helped me understand the context behind some of our conflicts over the years. I shared my own perspective about feeling taken for granted and unappreciated despite consistently supporting her through various challenges and crises. We talked for over 2 hours and covered a lot of ground that we had never discussed openly before. At the end of our conversation, we agreed to try rebuilding our relationship slowly and with clearer boundaries about respect and communication. I told her that I wouldn't be providing financial support for her major life events going forward, but that I was willing to work on having a healthier sibling relationship if she was genuinely committed to changing her behavior patterns. She accepted these terms. 6 months later, our relationship isn't perfect, but it's significantly better than it was before the engagement party incident. My sister has followed through on her commitment to therapy and has made noticeable improvements in how she communicates with me and other family members. She still occasionally slips into old patterns of competition or comparison, but she catches herself much more quickly and apologizes when it happens. My parents have also reflected on their role in enabling some of the unhealthy dynamics between my sister and me over the years. They've made efforts to treat us more equally and avoid comparisons that might fuel resentment or competition. The whole experience taught me that sometimes you have to be willing to enforce consequences, even when they seem harsh, in order to create space for genuine change and growth. My sister's public humiliation at her engagement party was cruel and unacceptable, but my response created an opportunity for all of us to examine our family relationships and make necessary improvements. The $30,000 in lost deposits was expensive, but it was money well spent if it helped my sister develop better self-awareness and communication skills that will benefit her for the rest of her life. And it certainly taught me the importance of standing up for myself when family members cross important boundaries, even when the consequences are uncomfortable for everyone involved.